Hello, everybody. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk. It's that thing that we listen to. Metal. Yeah, let's talk metal. Sorry if I'm a little rusty. Even though I put out a video every Tuesday lately, I tend to record videos in batches. Well, I'll try to do several recordings pretty close together and just space them out to make them last and give everyone time in between. There's lots of other channels and other stuff people have to do other than just watch videos all the time. So it's actually been a couple of weeks since I recorded a video. So yeah, a little rusty. And the past couple of weeks have been extremely busy with work, which is why I had recorded ahead because I knew it'd be tough to make videos for a while. But making a new one now, getting ready to post. In the past several weeks, I have started doing some Friday night streams with Marty over at the Marty Worm Channel. Those have been a lot of fun. Wanted to say a quick thank you to Marty for letting me collaborate with him on those streams. Marty has kind of reimagined the Friday night stream sessions. For a long time during the pandemic, he and a lot of other well-known, music, metal, punk YouTube creators had been doing, sort of the, hangout and chat style Friday night streams. And, those had kind of run their course to some extent. And so Marty wanted to reinvent it in a more topical sense, whether it be one focused musical topic for the evening and keep the length, a little more sane rather than their, 7, 8, 9 hour chat sessions. And so, yeah, it's been really fun doing those. If by chance you haven't checked them out, you should definitely do so. They're posted over on the Marty Worm channel. We've had a lot of fun. We're trying to bring on a third person each week. And depending on what topic we're talking about, we're kind of rotating that third slot so that whoever we bring on is someone who's going to be, really excited about that particular topic and, have a good knowledge to draw on for whatever the conversation is going to be about. So, yeah, just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge those streams have been going on. The most recent of these streams was last Friday when we talked about bands that recorded just one album and then disappeared. And, obviously recorded one good album that we liked. And it was a topic that, at first it took a little while to start finding some titles that I wanted to talk about during the stream. But then as I kept digging deeper and deeper into the record shelves, I kept finding more and more cool things. And it's just like, oh man, I can't possibly talk about all these during the stream. We typically limit each person to picking 10 items, and that fits pretty nice into a 2 hour format. So I was like, well, there's too many good ones. So I can't put all these back. Hey, let's just make a follow-up video. So I guess I'm making a response video to my own video, which now that I say it out loud sounds a little weird, but you're just going to have to humor me because there were a lot of other cool things I found that, yeah, I just couldn't get to everything during the stream. So I want to cover a few more of them tonight, and I've actually got at least one more video's worth that I wanted to do as well. So you'll be hearing some more of these one-hit wonders for a little while. Now, if by chance you didn't catch the stream yet, the rule was pretty simple. It had to be a band that did not put out another full-length studio recording. If they demoed some material or had a live recording or later on had an anthology with some unreleased stuff, that was okay. But the idea was really they just had one album, not one album plus a bunch of EPs or something like that. Pretty much just one studio album was their official released output. And one that I didn't get to talk about, but definitely wanted to hear, was a band from South Carolina, my stomping grounds. And these guys were around in the mid and late 80s. They're called Carnage. And they made this one album in 1986 called Carnage. It works. This is reissue CD. It's on, I believe, Heaven and Hell Records. The original was sort of an independently released thing. Hard album to track down the originals of. But This is a really cool album, and before I try to describe it, let's actually just go ahead and check out a little bit of it. I'm going to listen to the first bit of the opening track, Barbarian Queen, which is one of my favorite opening tracks on any album, because, well, hell, just listen to it.
Cross the burning sands of the Middle Ages rose the barbarian queen!
All right, there's a sample of Barbarian Queen by the Mighty Carnage. Really fun track and a pretty good representation of their sound. Very punky, a lot of punk influence mixed in there. Sounds like it should be the soundtrack to some kind of Mad Max movie or something. Really driving, heavy beats, great melodies, great hooks throughout it, and just a little bit insane, a little over the top, a little unhinged, but that's okay. That's the way we like it sometimes. Cool album. Not every track on here goes that way. Some of them have a little bit more of a laid-back vibe, but even those tend to have like a little bit of a creepiness to them, something that's always makes you feel a little uneasy, a little bit on edge. It's a very short album. The original album release itself clocks in at just over 24 minutes, even though it runs about 7 or 8 songs. So yeah, not a long one, but it packs a good wallop for what it was. Now, Carnage is one I didn't include on the live stream conversation for a couple of reasons. One thing was I wanted to have a chance to play a sample of Barbarian Queen because I love that song. It's a killer. But the other thing was they kind of sort of maybe had another release. And it's a little hard to track down details on this. If you look them up like on Metal Archives and other places, there is an EP and a single listed that came out a few years later. I think the EP is listed as 88 and the single's listed as 89. So there's a couple year gap. The thing that's kind of weird is the tracks are, just tracks rehashed from the album from a couple of years earlier, which is a little strange. It's like, why wouldn't they have put new tracks on or at least new versions of tracks? I don't really get it. Another thing that's kind of strange, the single at least was released on a real small label called Amethyst Records. It's also known for putting out a couple of other singles that are of interest to heavy metal collectors. For example, the Christian heavy metal band Commandment had their Oriental Maiden single put out on Amethyst. And I've heard some kind of sketchy things about the label over the years. There's been allegations of things that they were more like sort of a tax shelter for, just doing things with money that you're not supposed to do and all that. So I don't know how legit the release of the single was. I don't know how the EP fits into it at all. It's kind of strange stuff. So I'm not even sure those were legit releases or that the band had much to do with those releases. Kind of strange situation. For my money, I'm okay with putting them into this one and done category because there's nothing different on the EP or single that's not on the album in the first place. Great album. If you really like that sort of driving, sort of a little bit unhinged, punk-driven metal from the mid-'80s, Carnage is definitely one to check out. The CD reissue is a good way to do so. And hey, if you poke around, turns out Heaven and Hell even released some of them with little refrigerator magnet, which I gotta say, this is one of the cooler throw-ins that I've seen heavy metal labels do. You know, stickers are okay and whatnot, but refrigerator magnets, got it stuck right here to the file cabinet next to me. This makes me happy. Check out Carnage. Okay, next one that we're going to talk about. Now, I'm technically doing this video before the live stream happens, so I don't know if anyone's going to bring this album up or not. If they did, womp womp. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, I guess. I didn't put it on my list for a couple of reasons, but I think it's one that some folks will most likely maybe have thrown out there, or someone in the chat should have brought up. It's this one, the Black Death LP. This one came out in 1984 on Auburn Records. Auburn always had a real strong stable of bands back in the day, with acts like Breaker and Shock Paris and Black Death. Black Death, of course, is known for being one of the relatively rare African-American bands in heavy metal. And this album has gained a real cult following over the years. It's touted pretty highly. It fetches a pretty high price these days. The original copies on Auburn came with a 7-inch single, which is a format you don't see released very often. But yeah, so you had an LP plus a single with it. I didn't include this on my list for the live stream because personally it is not one of my own personal favorites. It's not a bad album. It definitely shows a lot of promise. There's a couple of things that have always kept me from fully embracing this album. One thing is that it's very uneven. There are some really good smoking tracks on here, but there are also some tracks that go off in very different directions. And things like When Tears Run Red just kind of drags along and wallows kind of bad. The Hunger is one I don't think is particularly good, as I recall. There are others that are great. It feels like they had a lot of ideas, but they haven't quite gotten them all to mesh just yet. They hadn't quite decided what they wanted their sound to be, and they were still kind of trying some things out and such. And so it makes for a real uneven listening experience to my ears. There are a lot of people that love it, and hey, that's quite okay. The second thing that kind of keeps me from really loving this album is that two of the band's best songs are not on this album. Not even on the bonus 7-inch that came with it. Not even in the bonus tracks on the CD reissue here either. Black Death had included some tracks on compilation albums, and in particular, this one, which was released about a year earlier. This was a comp just called Cleveland Metal, featured a lot of bands from Cleveland who played heavy metal. The name is pretty self-explanatory here. And it's got 2 tracks by Black Death on it. There's a couple of variations of this compilation that are out there, but they all have the same 2 Black Death tunes on it. They are Taken by Force and, making sure I get the song titles right here, and Until We Rock. And those 2 songs smoke anything that is on the LP. If you've only heard the LP, you've never checked out these 2 tracks, let me introduce some evidence before the court. Here we go. A little bit of Taken by Force. Damn. Still not convinced? If so, I don't know what's wrong with you, but exhibit number 2. Let's check out a little bit of Until We Rock, their other track from the compilation. Those 2 songs are mind-blowingly good. And I'd heard this compilation before I ever heard the album. So I, of course, went into this album with expectations just sky high. Those songs are fantastic. They blow away everything else on that compilation. And if you saw the other bands listed on the cover there, that compilation is pretty stacked with some great stuff. We'll save Cleveland compilations for another video another night. The stuff on this album just does not live up to those 2 tracks, in my personal opinion. And as such, I've always been a little bummed out that this album seems rather unfocused, whereas those 2 tracks are so well written, so well done, so well performed. And then again, you get tracks on here, The Hunger, on Tears Run Red, some of the ones I read earlier, they're not as focused, they're not as tight, they're not as powerful. Some of the stuff, yeah, is there, but the album just didn't come together the way I expected it to based on those tracks. I don't know what happened. Not a bad album, but not a personal favorite. But it definitely does deserve mention among the sort of one-hit wonders, because the band recorded this one thing and vanished into the mists of time. They had demoed some material before this, I think as early as 1977. So, they worked at it for a while. And it's one that, yeah, a lot of folks do like. Now, you should mention as well, there has been controversy about this band in more recent years. At least one member has given a pretty controversial interview with Hell's Headbangers and stuff like that. Not going to get into all of the details on that. Some people not interested in the band for those reasons. Okay, that's their choice. But yeah, it definitely stands, as one of those one-hit wonders. And to me, it always stands as one of those what-if moments. What if they had taken a little more time, maybe, tightened up their sound? Or what if they had really followed up on those 2 tracks off the Cleveland Metal compilation and made a whole album that sounded like that? That's an album I would cuddle and sleep with every night and make sweet, sweet love to in the wee, wee hours of the morning. Okay, that probably didn't sound right, but it's late, I'm tired, and we still got a couple more to go. So let's just move on with it. Okay, number 3 for tonight's list is a band out of Dallas, Texas called RUFF JUSTICE, and their album No Justice, No Peace. Really promising band name. It's even spelled incorrectly in true heavy metal band fashion. I always like it when they spell the name wrong. I don't know why. It's just a thing. It works. You got the metal warrior, princess, maiden, badass female there on the front, giant sword on the back. What more could you want out of a 1980s heavy metal record? Well, the catch to this one is that it's not an 80s heavy metal record. This was recorded and released in 1995, which mid-90s US, not exactly the time you expect to find a lot of traditional heavy metal being played and recorded. But let's go to the tape. This will be a little bit of the title track, No Justice, No Peace. All right, there's a little RUFF Justice, really strong sound. Love their vocalist in particular. He can really belt it out. The album has several really strong tracks on it. To my knowledge, they never recorded anything else. There's no demos or anything listed online that I've come across. Band members did not go on to other projects, which that in a sense makes some sense because, again, 1995, you weren't going to get a lot of attention playing this kind of stuff in the heartland of the United States. It just wasn't going to happen. If you were playing metal in 1995, you were from Texas, and you were not named Pantera, good luck getting any attention. But yeah, RUFF Justice, really cool little album. It's definitely one that's worth checking out if you liked that clip. Now, again, not every song's quite that strong. Some of them are a little rough around the edges. This is kind of, you can tell it's a smaller time release for sure, but had a lot of potential. Really cool, and one that I think deserved a shout out for these kind of one-hit wonders of where did they go. Interestingly, when I looked them up on Metal Archives just to double check my dates and such, the band is listed as active. And there's a picture of them there that, well, let's just say it definitely wasn't taken in 1995. So I guess they've gotten the band back together. And that's one thing that has been tricky about doing these one-hit wonders for the stream and for these videos. So many bands, disappeared for maybe 20 years or more, but then did come back together and may have recorded something that you never heard about. There were several that I had thought about including, and when I went and double checked, it's like, oh, well, it turns out they actually did make one more album in 2009 after having been gone for 23 years. Womp womp. RUFF Justice, though. Good one to check out. All right, we got one more to check out tonight. And kind of staying out in the western U.S., a little further west, we're going to Arizona in the early 80s for an oddly named band called Loosely Tight. I don't know. But, hey, it's got a tank on the cover. It can't be bad, right? And it's not. It's actually really, really good. There are several of these kind of hard rock, heavy metal bands from the southwestern U.S. that put out like one album each in the earlier 1980s. For example, there's another one called Volts that I'm going to talk about in a separate video. There was a band called, there was a Slayer that's not the Slayer you're thinking of, and it's also not the Slayer from San Antonio, completely different Slayer number 3. There was a band called, I think it was White Noise. So there were several of these bands in that area that put stuff out. Icon was active in the area. Loosely Tight is one of my favorite of the bunch. They made this one album called Fightin' Society, and they didn't really do anything else. They've gotten a little bit of the anthology treatment. They may have done one demo much later on, but this is the only thing they really did. It came out in 81, and it's a really good album. I'm going to play you a clip of one of the faster tracks on it. This one smokes really good. Nice sizzling guitar work in a track called From Another Place.
Can't
All right, from another place. That place was Arizona, and the band was Loosely Tight. They were pretty damn good. One thing I like about this album is every track on it is really solid, but they all have their own identity. This is not a case where every song kind of runs together and sounds a lot like the others. You've got, that Faster from Another Place. You've got Fighting Society, which sounds like a little bit of a sort of, amped up, the stronger Thin Lizzy material from, say, Thunder and Lightning era. You've got a really good, it's almost a ballad, but just a really well crafted, slower song called The Walls Between. And it's an amazing song. I would have played a clip of it, but again, it's a little slower, but excellent tune, possibly the best one on here. Overall, the album reminds me a lot of what Riot was doing in the late 70s and early 80s. So, especially, Fire Down Under, Narita era material. That's the closest thing I can really think to compare it to. Excellent album, definitely worth checking out. The original vinyl is, of course, a pain in the ass to find. No surprise there. It's also a really, really hard album to find in good condition. When copies turn up, 9 times out of 10, and I may only have seen 10 copies in my life, it does not show up often, but it's an album that shows ring wear extremely badly. I'm guessing the cover must be pretty thin cardboard, because a lot of copies you see have very noticeable ring wear, especially down here and really up here on the dark blue. So it's hard to find an album, and if you're really picky about condition, you only want things that are mint, near mint, it's going to take you a long time to find one with a really, really clean cover. Just a tough one to do. But hey, that's why they make affordable, easier to obtain CD reissues of this stuff, so that you can hear some really cool music without spending years trying to track it down and having to eat cat food casserole for months on end in order to pay off the PayPal bill at the end of the month. All right, so that's enough for tonight. There's 4 more one-hit wonders. All these bands made just the one album, but they're definitely worth a shout out. Whether there may not all be personal favorites, but yeah, Black Death, Rough Justice, Carnage, Loosely Tight. They made that one album. They left that one little footnote in heavy metal history, but it's definitely one that you should know about. And check them out if you haven't. All right. Leave a comment down below if there are some other one-hit wonder albums that you think should have been shouted out on Friday's stream and we didn't get around to. Again, I've got one more of these videos coming up in the near future. I'm not going to record it tonight. It's getting a little late and it's time to wrap things up. But yeah, I'll do at least one more of these, maybe more in the future. So give me some ideas of what you might want to talk about, and who knows, maybe it'll be in the next one. Okay, that's enough for now. So until next time, everybody take care, stay safe, and as always, keep banging your head.